How far does the solar wind travel?
The Sun's corona extends millions of miles beyond the Sun's surface. The plasma of the solar wind, however, extends billions of miles farther, well beyond the orbit of Pluto. Beyond there, the plasma density continues to drop. There is a limit, called the heliopause, where the influence of the solar wind dwindles to just about nothing. The region inside the heliopause, which is thought to be some 8 to 14 billion miles, 13 to 22 billion kilometers, from the Sun, is called the heliosphere.
How do we know Earth's magnetic field can flip upside down?
In 1906, French physicist Bernard Brunhes, 1867 to 1910, found rocks with magnetic fields oriented opposite to that of Earth's magnetic field. He proposed that those rocks had been laid down at a time when Earth's magnetic field was oriented opposite to the way it is today. Brunhes's idea received support from the research of Japanese geophysicist Motonori Matuyama. 1884 to 1958, who in 1929 studied ancient rocks and determined that Earth's magnetic field had flipped its orientation a number of times over the history of our planet. Today, studies of both rock and the fossilized microorganisms embedded in the rock show that at least 9 reversals of Earth's magnetic field orientation have occurred over the past 3.6 million years. The exact cause of the polarity reversal of Earth's magnetic field is still unknown. Current hypotheses suggest that the reversal is caused by Earth's internal processes, rather than external influences like solar activity.
What mineral were scientists surprised to see in high quantities in the stratosphere?
Scientists discovered a higher than expected amount of salt in the mesosphere within the stratosphere. The current theory is that the salt has been left behind by meteor activity. The tropopause is the layer between the troposphere and the stratosphere that hovers around 10 miles, 16 kilometers, above the ground. Within the tropopause is the tropopause break, a region through which water vapor and air can easily pass from the troposphere to the stratosphere.
Who was the first person to seriously study tornadoes?
John P. Finley, 1854 to 1943, an officer in the U.S. Army Signal Service and meteorologist, was the first to write an authoritative book on the subject, Tornadoes, which was published in 1887.
How did the Kalpana 1 get its name?
India's Kalpana 1 satellite was originally called the METSAT, meteorological satellite. However, it was renamed in honor of Kalpana Chawla, the Indian astronaut who died in the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster on February 1, 2003.
What is a 100-year flood?
A 100-year flood refers not only to the size of a flood, but also to the odds of it occurring. A 100-year flood has a 1%, or 1 in 100, chance of occurring in any given year. It has no relationship to the frequency of occurrence. The magnitude of such a flood is relative to the frequency of occurrence. So a 100-year flood is much larger than any run-of-the-mill annual flood. A 500-year flood has only a 1 in 500, 0.2%. chance of occurring in any given year and would be much larger and more devastating than a 100-year flood.
What was the deadliest tornado ever in the world?
On April 26, 1989, a tornado landed about 40 miles, 65 kilometers, north of Dhaka, Bangladesh. When it was over, 1,300 people were dead, 15,000 were hurt, and about 100,000 lost their homes.
Is it a good idea to open windows and doors so that air pressure is equalized inside a house?
There is a long-standing myth that when a tornado is near a home it lowers the air pressure outside so much that the higher interior pressure in a house will cause it to explode. This is not true. Tornadoes damage and rip apart houses simply by virtue of wind speeds and the debris they blow about. Opening doors and windows increases the possibility that flying objects will enter the home and possibly hit those hiding inside.
What is albedo?
Albedo is the amount of the sun's energy that is reflected back from the surface of the Earth. Overall, about 33% of the sun's energy bounces off the Earth and its atmosphere and travels back into space. Albedo is usually expressed as a percentage.
What do butterflies have to do with chaos theory?
American mathematician and meteorologist Edward Norton Lawrence, 1917 to 2008, came up with chaos theory as a way of explaining the unpredictable way in which mathematical and natural systems, including weather, behave. The idea was that even the tiniest changes in initial conditions of a complex dynamic system can lead to huge, measurable effects over time. as a colorful metaphorical illustration of this concept. He posed that a single butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could be the instigator of a tornado in Texas. He called this the butterfly effect.
What is the effect of global warming and climate change on average temperatures?
By the year 2100, relative to 1990, world temperatures could rise from 2 to 11.5 degrees Fahrenheit. 1.1 to 6.4 degrees Celsius, and sea levels may rise about 3 to 5 feet, 1 or 2 meters.
What unique weapon was employed during World War I?
During the war to end all wars, avalanches were deliberately triggered in some battles in Europe as a weapon. Estimates are that between 40,000 and 80,000 soldiers died as a result.
Which state is known as the Sunshine State?
Florida has adopted the name of Sunshine State. Although it does have a warm, often sunny climate, it also has a pronounced rainy season from April through October. Ironically, Florida actually has more thunderstorms than any other U.S. state. Arizona actually deserves the credit of being the true Sunshine State.
What is no casting?
No casting is a somewhat silly-sounding word that refers to predicting weather in the very short term, about 2 hours. Given the satellites, radar, and other modern tools that are at meteorologists' disposal, no casting is probably the most accurate type of forecasting. Weather patterns, though they can still change abruptly with little notice, such as in the case of tornadoes, are fairly predictable in the short term. For example, if you see a large, well-organized storm front heading toward your city just a few miles away, it is a safe bet that a weather forecaster can tell you precisely when it will affect your neighborhood and what weather conditions you can expect.
What are the Santa Ana wines?
When a high-pressure system forms over the Great Basin, usually during the fall, it pushes air masses downwards, causing compression that results in winds in California that elevate temperatures upwards of 100 degrees Fahrenheit 38 degrees Celsius. These winds can reach speeds well over 75 miles, 120 kilometers per hour in many cases, blowing down into the densely populated coastal regions. The dry winds of the Santa Ana help create conditions that make brush Fires in the hills around Los Angeles and other cities much more likely. In fact, one of the most disastrous fires in California's history, known as the Cedar Fire, occurred in October 2003 as a result of strong Santa Ana winds. The fire destroyed 721,791 acres, 2,921 square kilometers, of land and burned 3,640 homes to the ground.
Has the weather ever been responsible for killing a U.S. president?
When U.S. President William Henry Harrison, 1773 to 1841, gave his inaugural address on March 4, 1841, the weather was miserable. Despite snow and bitter cold, President Harrison insisted on remaining outside and giving one of the longest inaugural addresses ever, 1 hour and 45 minutes. At 68 years old, the former general and war hero was not in the most robust health, and many blamed the weather conditions as the cause of President Harrison's subsequent pneumonia. 1 month after becoming president, he died, thus earning him the distinction of the U.S. president serving the shortest term in office.
Can tides influence weather?
Many scientists believe that tides have a small influence on the weather. Tides can have some effect upon ocean currents, for example, which, in turn, influence weather patterns. It is also known that the moon's tug on our planet can actually cause measurable changes in topology. The Earth's crust actually moving up and down. This can, in turn, encourage earthquakes or volcano eruptions. And the latter definitely affects our weather. Tides, it can be said, may also be relevant to weather because, when strong onshore winds coincide with high tides, coastal flooding is made worse than would otherwise occur at low tides.
What is hypothermia?
Hypothermia is a life-threatening cooling of the body's temperature due to exposure to cold water, ice, or air. Chills and shivering can progress to much more serious symptoms, including disorientation, drowsiness, slurred or incoherent speech, memory loss, and unconsciousness. It only takes a decrease in core body temperature to about 94 degrees to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 34 degrees to 35 degrees Celsius, for the onset of hypothermia to occur, and external conditions don't even have to be particularly harsh. For example, a human body floating in 40 degrees Fahrenheit 4 degrees Celsius. Water can suffer from hypothermia in less than half an hour. Professional medical assistance is, of course, indicated for treatment of hypothermia, with the most important procedure involving stabilization of the body's temperature. An effective treatment is to have the patient inhale humid, warmed air. 107 degrees to 122 degrees Fahrenheit 43 degrees to 50 degrees Celsius, which warms the respiratory and nervous systems, and helps restore brainstem function that, in turn, controls heart function.
Why do more people die in cold waves in the American South than they do in the North?
Simply put, cold waves have proven more lethal in the South because people are not as well prepared for them. Homes and other buildings tend to have poorer insulation, and people do not own as many if any warm winter clothes.
Are all funnel clouds tornadoes?
No, in order to be classified as a tornado, the vortex needs to touch both the cloud above and the ground below. If it does not, then it is just considered to be a funnel cloud. Also, not all tornadoes have visible funnel clouds. If there is not dust and debris in the vortex, the tornado may be invisible or nearly invisible to the naked eye. Interestingly, you can have a tornado without a funnel cloud, because a cloud that descends to the ground without rotation can also be categorized as a tornado.
Does Earth's magnetic field ever change?
Yes, the magnetic field is constantly changing, though very slowly. The magnetic poles actually drift several kilometers each year, often in seemingly random directions. Over thousands of years, the strength of the magnetic field can go up and down significantly. Even more amazing, Earth's magnetic field can reverse directions. The North magnetic pole becomes the South magnetic pole, and vice versa. According to scientific measurements, our planet's magnetic field last had a polarity reversal about 800,000 years ago.
Are tornadoes often formed in hurricanes?
It is fairly common for tropical storms and hurricanes to generate tornado activity. And sometimes several tornadoes touch down in a single storm. One of the best examples of this was 1967's Hurricane Beulah, during which 115 tornadoes were seen. In 2004, Hurricane Francis generated 123 tornadoes, the most ever recorded.
What remarkable observation did science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke make?
Arthur C. Clarke, 1917 to 2008, is well known to science fiction fans. His 1948 short story The Sentinel was the basis for the 1968 film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Among his many accomplishments, he was also very interested in satellites. During World War II, Clark was a radar technician for the Royal Air Force. And in 1945 he proposed designs for a communications system using satellites. He reasoned that this was possible if satellites could be placed in orbit above the equator while traveling 22,248 miles, 35,797 kilometers, per hour. This would put them in geostationary orbit, meaning that each satellite would remain directly above a predetermined point on the Earth's surface. This idea proved correct, and is used now for both communications and weather satellites. The Clark Belt, a band of space over the equator at an altitude of 22,300 miles, 35,800 kilometers, where geostationary satellites may orbit, is named in his honor.
Why do environmental firms hire meteorologists?
Weather patterns have an important effect on the distribution of pollutants in the air, on land, and in our oceans. Environmental firms, as well as government agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency, hire meteorologists to help them predict the environmental impact of construction projects such as power plants and factories. An understanding of prevailing winds near a proposed coal-burning plant, for instance, will help people understand how potential air pollution, acid rain, and ozone levels will impact the environment not only locally but also, perhaps, across many states or even countries.
Who was the Snowflake Man?
American photographer and farmer Wilson A. Bentley, 1865 to 1931, was nicknamed the Snowflake Man, or just Snowflake Bentley, because he photographed images of over 2,400 snowflakes. His stunning photo collection capturing the natural beauty of snowflakes was published in 1931. Snow crystals. Needles look just like the name, thin, long ice crystals. They usually form when the temperature is about 23 degrees Fahrenheit -5 degrees Celsius. Triangular crystals often form at temperatures of about 28 degrees Fahrenheit -2 degrees Celsius, and are rather like deformed stellar flakes where half the arms are not fully formed, creating a triangle shape as a result. Bullet rosettes happen when several columns melt and freeze together, looking like several crystal bullets merged at the heads at odd angles to each other. Rimmed crystals occur when additional water droplets freeze onto already formed snowflakes, giving them a fuzzy appearance. Irregular crystals are snowflakes that are rather disorganized. Mess of multiple snowflakes that have broken up and melted together.
What is the National Flood Insurance Program?
The National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, was established by the U.S. federal government in 1956 as a subsidized insurance program for home and business owners. The government began the program by creating flood insurance rate maps, showing the boundaries of 100-year and 500-year flood zones. The cost of the insurance is based on the flood risk. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, oversees the program and requires the purchase of flood insurance by any owner affected by a disaster before they can be provided with disaster assistance. This way, the next time a flood occurs, they will be insured.
When a weatherman says that the wind direction is westerly, does that mean the wind is coming from the west or that it is blowing towards the west?
Wind directions expressed by meteorologists and the National Weather Service indicate which direction the wind is coming from rather than where it is blowing. So, if an area is experiencing northwest winds, for example, it means that the wind is coming from the northwest and blowing toward the southeast. In other words, high-pressure zones contain more densely packed molecules of various gases, which tend to flow to areas where the air is less dense. This concept was first explained by the Greek philosopher Anaximander. C 610 B.C. 546 BCE, who explained that wind was a natural phenomenon and not caused by the gods or by trees waving their leaves, as some people thought.
What are the different types of satellites used today?
The two types of satellites used for weather observations are geostationary and polar orbiting. Geostationary satellites remain above a fixed point on the Earth's equator by traveling at a speed that matches that of the planet's spin. Polar orbiting satellites circle the Earth from pole to pole. These satellites orbit at a speed so that, 2 times a day, they are over the exact same spot on the planet in what is called a sun-synchronous orbit.
Is the Earth's rotation slowing down?
Yes. About 400 million years ago, there were 400 days a year, versus the present day 365. Eventually, if the sun doesn't die first, the Earth will stop rotating completely.
What role did Walter Maurice Elsasser play in discovering the magnetic field?
German-born American physicist Walter Maurice Elsasser, 1904 to 1991, was the scientist who discovered that the Earth's magnetic field is generated as a result of how the planet's hot core acts like a dynamo. He also brilliantly discovered that analysis of rock particles reveal clues about the orientation of the Earth's magnetic field over time, which in turn contributed to the science of plate tectonics and the history of Earth's climate.
What is a state climatologist?
A state climatologist is a professional in the field who has been designated by a state government or agency of the state as the state's official climatologist. They must also be recognized by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and by the Director of the National Climatic Data Center. Currently, 48 states have a state climatologist, the exceptions being Tennessee, Rhode Island, as well as Washington, D.C. Also, climatologists have been designated for Puerto Rico, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. State climatologists are supported by the American Association of State Climatologists, which was founded in 1976. State climatologists receive their salaries either from the state or from a university. And they also work closely with the National Weather Service.
What do the colors shown on television radars indicate?
Colors on weather maps shown on television news programs are indications of precipitation levels. Cooler colors, blue, green, etc., indicate light precipitation, while warmer colors, yellow, orange, red, are used for heavier precipitation.
Is a polar low like an Arctic hurricane?
Some strong hurricanes such as 1992's Hurricane Andrew have continued to be active while traveling as far north as the Arctic. But at that point they are no longer considered tropical storms or hurricanes. There is also something called a polar low, which is like a small hurricane that can form above the Arctic Circle. Polar lows, extratropical lows, tend to range from 50 to 250 miles, 100 to 500 kilometers in diameter, versus tropical hurricanes that are easily twice as big in many cases. Not only are they smaller, but polar lows tend to have a shorter lifespan than southern hurricanes, rarely lasting more than 36 hours and more typically only about 12 hours. However, they can still be very intense, generating strong winds and heavy snowfalls.
To what professional societies and organizations should a meteorologist belong?
Most meteorologists in the United States participate as active members of the American Meteorological Society. Those specifically interested in the atmospheric sciences often also join the American Geophysical Union, which is headquartered in Washington, D.C. Meteorologists specializing in forecasting can join the National Weather Association for its benefits. The NWA is also concerned with the operational aspects of meteorology.
What is weather?
Weather is defined as the state of the atmosphere at a given location and over a relatively short period of time.
How do some animals appear to be able to predict an oncoming storm?
There is a considerable amount of folklore and old wives' tales about how to predict the weather based on animal behavior. On the other hand, there do, in fact, seem to be ways one can tell if a storm is approaching, just by observing animals. Biologists and other scientists, as well as other people who work with animals daily, have noted some truth to the following: geese tend not to fly when a storm is nearing. One explanation for this is that air pressure drops when foul weather approaches, and it might be harder for some larger birds, such as Canada geese, to get off the ground in such conditions. More likely, though, is that the birds instinctively understand that lower air pressure is a good indication of an upcoming storm. Seagulls and other ocean birds also tend to remain grounded before bad weather ensues. Many farmers believe that cows stay away from hilltops and remain close together in herds. Similar behavior has also been observed among deer and elk. Because frogs like it moist and humid, which tends to be the case during and just before stormy weather, they remain out of the water for longer periods of time. You can tell because they are croaking and ribbiting a lot more before it rains. Mosquitoes and biting black flies tend to bite and suck blood with much more ferocity and urgency before bad weather, perhaps saving up so they don't go hungry while they seek shelter from the storm.
Who first described the phenomenon of acid rain?
Scottish chemist Robert Angus Smith, 1817 to 1884, who was very interested in water pollution and other issues regarding the environment and public health, conducted research in which he discovered, in 1852, that air pollution was causing acid rain. Smith also helped found the discipline of chemical climatology, and was the author of the influential 1872 book Air and Rain.
What is the coldest city in America's lower 48 states?
Butte, Montana, holds the honor of being the coldest city in the contiguous 48 states. The temperature in Butte falls below the freezing point 223 days each year, on average.
What is a radiosonde?
The idea of using balloons to aid in the study of the atmosphere was first explored by the French when, in 1784, a hot air balloon was used for this purpose. It took a long time, however, before the practice came into common use. More commonly thought of as a weather balloon, radiosondes, sonde is French for probe, are collections of weather-detecting instruments attached to a balloon that is released into the upper atmosphere. They were first used in Europe during the 1920s and 1930s. Radiosondes typically measure temperature, moisture, and wind speeds. And they often include small, battery-powered motors. More modern radiosondes called radiosondes include a radar reflector so they can be more easily tracked. Radiosondes reach elevations that can take them into the stratosphere. Once it reaches its maximum height, the balloon will burst and the instrument package will be carried safely down on a parachute. Another way to deploy a radiosonde is by dropping it from an airplane. When this is done, the device is called a dropsonde. Rocket sondes, weather probes mounted on rockets, as one might guess, may also be used on occasion. There are over 800 radiosonde launch sites around the world, with the probes being launched at midnight and noon. Data is generally shared by meteorologists around the world.
Why is air pollution in China such a huge problem?
In recent years, China has been experiencing an unprecedented economic and industrial boom. Cities are growing, manufacturing, with the exception of the onset of a worldwide recession in 2008, has been flourishing, and living standards are rising. This has been great news for many Chinese citizens. But it has come with a cost, a huge environmental problem. Although China has many environmental regulations on the books, it has had tremendous problems enforcing them. The result is that the country is probably the most polluted on the planet, with only India as a rival in this infamous area. The air quality in about 2/3 of the cities is considered unhealthy for people. Acid rain is damaging crops, and life expectancy rates are dropping because of pollution-related health issues. The Chinese government is not unaware of this shameful problem. And the country made news in 2008 when it hosted the Olympic Games. Heavy restrictions were placed on auto traffic and factories so that the air would be clear enough that the athletes would not be sickened by the smog.
What is carbon monoxide?
Carbon monoxide, CO, is an odorless, colorless, and tasteless gas that is lethal. Auto exhaust is one common source. But CO can result from the combustion of almost any material containing carbon. The molecules bond to hemoglobin in the blood, preventing the hemoglobin from transporting oxygen through the body as it normally does, depriving organs and other tissues of oxygen can result in death within minutes. The early symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, however, include drowsiness, disorientation, and headaches. In well-ventilated areas, carbon monoxide poisoning should not be a problem. But in closed-in areas, such as a garage, it is hazardous. This is why you should never leave your car running inside a garage. But carbon monoxide can also come from clogged chimneys, unvented space heaters, gas appliances, grills, and lawn mowers. Homes should be equipped with carbon monoxide monitors as a precaution. While carbon monoxide poisoning is more likely inside a home or garage than outdoors, this pollutant can be a problem in large urban areas. In 1995, for example, there was a strong temperature inversion in the city of Chicago that caused carbon monoxide levels to be pushed toward the ground, rather than dissipating. The toxic gas then found its way into some homes.
What place has the most rainy days every year?
When it comes to the number of rainy days per year, the winner is again Mount Wailea on Kauai, Hawaii, with up to 350 rainy days annually.
What U.S. drought has been the costliest in terms of financial damages?
There have been many severe droughts in the United States over the course of history. The most famous one is the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. However, in terms of money, the costliest drought thus far has been the 1988 to 1989 drought that resulted in an estimated $40 billion hit to the U.S. economy. Over half the country's population was negatively affected.
What would happen if a large comet or asteroid impact occurred?
If a large extraterrestrial body, such as a comet or asteroid, with a diameter of 6 miles, 10 kilometers, or more struck anywhere on our planet, land, or sea, the impact would be felt worldwide. The initial impact would vaporize parts of the Earth's crust, as well as the oceans, and send shock waves out to every corner of the globe. Debris would be shot out into the upper atmosphere, and the heat generated from the collision with the atmosphere and crust would turn the sky red and set the world's forests aflame. After the initial collision, debris would rain down everywhere. destroying even those buildings, wildlife, and people who were far from the impact. Virtually all living things inhabiting the surface would be killed. And even sea creatures would die as the temperatures of the oceans reached the boiling point. Long after the impact, the atmosphere would be coated in a layer of ash that would circle the Earth for months or even years, plunging the planet into a nuclear winter after the initial fireball. About the only things that might survive such as is believed to have happened 65 million years ago. After the last such event would be creatures that could burrow underground or hide deep inside caves.
What is a smog alert?
A smog alert is a warning that air quality conditions are so bad outside that physical exertion outdoors may lead to respiratory discomfort. For people suffering from asthma, severe smog alert conditions could lead to asthma attacks and even hospitalization. An orange level or above reading in the air quality index is cause for a smog alert to be issued.
What are the different types of lightning?
Below are descriptions of the various forms that lightning can take. 1. Normal lightning, also called streaked or forked lightning, travels from a cloud to ground, b. cloud to air, c. cloud to cloud, or d. in cloud. 2. Sheet lightning, a shapeless flash of lightning that covers a broad area. 3. Ribbon lightning, normal lightning blown sideways by the wind, in a way that makes it appear like parallel, successive strokes. 4. Bead or chain lightning, lightning broken up into evenly spaced segments or beads. 5. Heat lightning, lightning seen along the horizon during hot weather that is a reflection of lightning that occurred beyond the horizon in a distant thunderstorm. 6. Ball lightning, a rare form of lightning in which a persistent and moving luminous white or colored sphere is seen. Ball lightning can last from a few seconds to several minutes, and it travels at a walking pace. It usually ranges in size from 4 to 8 inches, 10 to 20 centimeters. But it has been observed at sizes between 2 inches to 6 feet, 5 to 183 centimeters.
Do rainbows ever appear by moonlight?
Yes, if there are raindrops in the air, and the moon is full and low on the horizon. The result can be a nighttime rainbow or moonbow. Usually, such a rainbow does not have the vibrant hues of its daytime cousin, appearing in muted or whitish shades. A moonbow is a rare and stunning sight.
What is virga?
Virga is a fancy name for rain that dries up before hitting the ground.
What is the difference between absolute humidity and relative humidity?
Absolute humidity is the actual amount of water that is mixed in with the air. It is measured in milligrams per liter. Relative humidity is expressed as a percentage and refers to the actual humidity divided by the maximum water vapor content possible at a given air temperature and pressure. For example, if a liter of air at 98 degrees Fahrenheit 37 degrees Celsius at 1 atmosphere pressure contains 44 grams 1.5 ounces of water vapor, and the actual water content is 11 grams, then the relative humidity would be 25%, 11/44 x 100 equals 25%.
How is the time set for the beginning of sunrise and sunset?
In the United States, sunrise officially begins when the leading edge of the sun disk first begins to rise over the horizon. And sunset happens when the top of the sun disappears behind the horizon. In Great Britain, however, sunrise and sunset are measured by the time when the middle of the sun is at the edge of the horizon. Scientists use highly sensitive light measuring instruments to calculate when dawn is approaching as much as 90 minutes before sunrise actually occurs.
What is the tablecloth cloud?
The Table Mountain near Cape Town, South Africa, is sometimes covered by a thin sheet of clouds when air is flowing off the top of the mountain in all directions. When this happens, the resulting cloud formation looks like a linen sheet. Hence, local people have named it the tablecloth.
How were the first high-altitude photographs of clouds taken?
During World War II, cameras were mounted aboard some of Germany's V-2 rockets to take pictures of cloud patterns. The success of these efforts inspired meteorologists to plan for weather satellites.
What are the most polluted cities in the world in terms of air quality?
The most severe air pollution can be found in the following cities: Cairo, Egypt; Delhi, India; Calcutta, India; Tianjin, China; Chongqing, China; Kanpur, India; Lucknow, India; Jakarta, Indonesia; and Shenyang, China.
Are there certain times of the day when tornadoes are more likely to happen?
Tornadoes can occur at any hour of the day, but 40% of them strike between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock p.m. The danger of a nighttime tornado is that people are often asleep and unprepared for when the warnings are sounded.
What is the National Hurricane Center?
Based at Florida International University near Miami. The National Hurricane Center is part of the National Weather Service. Its mission is to predict and warn of dangerous hurricanes in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. The headquarters building itself is heavily fortified against hurricanes. Having 10-inch thick walls, roll-down shutters for its windows, and being far enough inland to be safe from storm surges, it is designed to survive 130-mile, 210 km per hour winds so that it can still be operational after almost any hurricane.
What is a gustnado?
Seen near thunderstorm outflows, a gustnado is a weak vortex that does not touch the clouds. Gustnados usually do little more damage than breaking some tree branches and overturning lawn furniture.
Do any other objects in the solar system have magnetic fields that flip upside down?
Yes, all planets and stars with magnetospheres are thought to undergo magnetic polarity reversals. The Sun, for example, undergoes a magnetic field polarity reversal every 11 years. Astronomers can see and study this effect in other astronomical bodies, and from them, learn more about the changes in Earth's own magnetic field.
What is meant by a trace of precipitation?
When the amount of rainfall is too little to be measured by a standard rain gauge, the precipitation is labeled a trace.
What is drizzle?
Drizzle is just small droplets of rain measuring, on average, about 0.02 inches, 0.05 centimeters, in diameter.
What is tephra?
Tephra is the name given to all the material that erupts from a volcano, excluding lava. Tephra comes in all shapes and sizes, and is also referred to as pyroclastic material, fire particles. A pyroclast is material that is ejected during the explosive eruption of a volcano in the form of fragments. Pyroclastic material that is hot enough to fuse together before it falls to the ground is called welded or volcanic tuff. Geologists classify tephra according to size. The following lists the most common types of tephra. Ash. Ash is material smaller than approximately a tenth of an inch. 2 mm, that is emitted from an erupting volcano. It can also contain lapilli, also called cinders or little stones, which is between 1 and 25 inches, 2 and 64 centimeters. In a large eruption, ash can accumulate to a great thickness and spread out for thousands of miles. Usually in the direction of the prevailing winds. Blocks are solid rock emitted from an erupting volcano. They can be anywhere from the size of a baseball to the size of a boulder as large as a house. Bombs are volcanic rocks that are still molten inside. They are shaped by their passage through the air. They form the brilliant arc seen in time-lapse photography of volcanic eruptions. Typically ranging from baseball to basketball size, they can be as large as a house. Bombs, and blocks, can be ejected from a volcano with initial velocities greater than 1,000 miles. 1,609 kilometers per hour, and can travel more than 3 miles, 5 kilometers. With some exploding and gushing molten rock when they eventually strike the ground. There are also certain types of bombs, including spindle bombs. Very fluid magma chunks that are streamlined as they fly through the air, and bread crust, which is formed from viscous magma, creating rounded blobs that often have fractured surfaces.